Hello, all you fellow dusty dogs and travelers of the trail out there, and welcome to another episode of D.I.Yote Bites, a bite-sized audio podcast-style series where I ramble for a bit about me, my life, and my interests. On today's episode, I'll talk about one of my favorite video game series of all time, and how a certain trilogy keeps boomeranging its way back into my life. Note that this is not sponsored, just a neat little retrospective for me and my memories. Enjoy! I believe my first exposure to the PlayStation gaming system was at 4 years old. It was not my first system, that belongs to the Sega Saturn, but I remember little of it until I was nearly 10. It wasn't even entirely my parents' idea for the PlayStation. Rather, the idea came from my aunt. I had 3 cousins on my dad's side I was around frequently, and it was my aunt's idea to get the system because her eldest and middle, both older than I, were asking for it. And Mom decided it wouldn't be a bad idea because they were getting into it. So at the Christmas of 1996, I opened up a PlayStation and a few games that my mom and my aunt had talked about. I do not remember much of that Christmas. What I do remember was that the first game I ever owned for the system was Crash Bandicoot. I won't assume most people know what that game is, so here's a very short overview. It is about an Eastern barred Bandicoot, an actual marsupial from Australia, being subjected to rapid evolution from the nefarious evil scientist Dr. Neocortex, who plans on using rapidly evolved mutants in order to take over the world. Enter our somewhat intelligently lacking hero, the Bandicoot being a failed subject who escapes Cortex's control. But in one of the oddly stranger elements of the plot, then has to go back and fight him again, because Cortex has also captured his girlfriend and he has to go rescue her. Looking back, it's very much a 90s premise, but it retains a certain charm. The look of the series has kept pretty well over the years, the early games making use of the lack of polygons from a relatively recent jump to 3D, to go with a more stylish, cartoony style, as well as a bright color scheme that makes the environments quite wonderful to look at. As a side note, they even apparently tried to make a literal, actual Saturday morning cartoon show out of it. And attempts are weird, but I give them credit for it. Anyways. The goal of the game is to get Crash through various levels while breaking boxes, either by jumping or spinning them, taking molecules from Taz the Tasmanian Devil of Looney Tunes fame. Break all the boxes, and you get a gem, with 100% completion being passing all levels and getting all the gems. Thing is, the first game in particular has gained a reputation for being somewhat difficult. You die once, you can keep going, but you lose your chance at the gem. And the controls do not help, with the latter levels containing some odd timing that admittedly takes a while to get into the rhythm. Which made it perfect game for all 4 of us, me and my 3 cousins, to play together. To foster sharing, the adults monitored us and kept us at 10 to 15 minute turns before the controller got passed to the next one. Thing is, me and my cousins were all into the game, with half of us considering it our job to get past the next level, or at least prove the others we were better than them at it by beating as many levels as we could before handing it off. I think over the next year we managed to beat the game twice, and on the second time even managed to get 100% completion. Doubly impressive for both the amount of cooperation required between 4 boys in the middle of the mine years of elementary school to work singularly on one thing. It's also one of the strange pieces of memory I retain, mostly because I still remember the 100% password, all 24 button presses by heart. Triangle, 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 x square. Triangle, 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 square, x. Triangle, O, triangle, 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 O square. Triangle, x, 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 x. Yes, even after 28 years, I still know the entire thing by heart. By the time Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, came out a mere year later in 1997, both my dad and my uncle had taken interest in the series. On occasion, it was enough that, on his visits from where he lived in Northern California, it was almost a ritual that we'd fire up the PlayStation, put in Crash Bandicoot 2, and we would add a 5th into the rotation, with us cheering on my uncle as he played it. As we'd finally gotten memory cards for the PlayStation that year, and the saving mechanic in Crash 2 was easier and more accessible, through a general hub room location instead of trying to wrangle your way into one of the even harder bonus rounds and make your way through it, it also was common for my dad to have his own save file on our PlayStation at home, though he never played as much as my uncle did, and certainly never as much as myself or the cousins. I also remember Crash Bandicoot as being the first game that was ever stolen. Until I was 10, I did not live in a particularly nice neighborhood growing up. I lived less than a block away from a major street. Most of the houses were sort of run down, and Dad remembers the only reliable person on the whole street was our neighbor. When I was in 2nd grade, around 1999 to 2000, it was the first time, and luckily only time so far, where our family has been robbed. As in, left for the day, came back to find a broken window and a few items gone. I was young enough I probably wouldn't have understood the whole panic if it weren't for Mom telling me I could play games for a bit to calm down, only to find the PlayStation and the set of games was missing. It wasn't in an obvious place. It was a cabinet behind a set of closed doors. This mildly spurred us to take a harder look at what actually got stolen. I don't remember all the details, but I remember the incident being one of the major ones that got them moving into our current house by the time I was in 4th grade. Somewhat nicer area, closer to work and school, and in an actual neighborhood instead of right off a main street. Crash Bandicoot 2, in particular, is also the first game I remember being played so much that the disc wore down and became unplayable. To be fair, it lasted a full 10 years among a bunch of rambunctious boys, but by the time I was 15, it began to freeze at 3 particular locations. The exit of Level 14 Road to Ruins bonus round, the walkway after the opening waterfall in Level 3 Hang 8, and occasionally if you move too fast after getting thrown off Polar the Bear Cub in Level 8's Barret. It's the first time I ever remember having to stop playing a game because it became literally unplayable. While the other two were finicky and could be worked around, the Road to Ruin freeze was so reliable we basically couldn't complete the game 100%. You had to use the bonus round to get some of the boxes for a gem, and so the best we could manage was 99% on a good day. And that wasn't counting problems with Level 18's Cold Hard Crash or Level 21's Piston It Away later on. There are, of course, other games in the franchise. Crash Bandicoot Warped came out in 1998 and received the same treatment between me and the cousins as the first two. Crash Team Racing followed in 1999 and became my first major racing game until Dad picked up Gran Turismo 2. As the series moved over to PlayStation 2, the Wrath of Cortex joined Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy as one of the first games I got for the system in 2001. Moving over to the handhelds, I ended up getting both the major Game Boy Advanced entries, The Huge Adventure and Entranced, the latter of which came with a CD that I loaded onto my iTunes. I've yet to listen to a song as many times as I did the Entranced remix of the main series theme. An astounding 1,500 plays before my account went down. To be fair, it was only like 100 seconds long, so it's not exactly a massive track, but 1,500 is still pretty impressive. To date, the only 2 games of the series I haven't played in some form are Crash Boom Bang for the DS, whose unpopularity quickly made it rare before I could get my hands on it, and Crash Tag Team Racing, which for some reason evaded my radar entirely. But there's something about the original trilogy that stuck with me and remained a defining influence even after I'd moved on to other games. I like the other ones in their own capacity. Wrath of Cortex had unique level designs and one of my favorite OSTs of the franchise. Crash of the Titans was the first to introduce a major storyline instead of a simple level-by-level collectathon conceit. And the GBAs are actually still pretty solid side-scrolling platformers that retain the feel of the PlayStation games rather well. And if you're looking for something fairly difficult, Entranced is actually fairly hard to 100% complete. But I still go back to the original trilogy, I'd say once a year in some form, and it's cropped up as a major factor in a few other areas of my life as well. I'd watched Let's Play since high school, with the first 2 I remember watching regularly being PewDiePie back in his Amnesia days, and a relative unknown, comparatively, called Unplayed a Thing, which I liked for his more trivia-oriented style as well as playing more obscure games. For example, one of the first ones that I remember him playing was Below the Root, and one of the major series that I ever remember from that channel is Dark Savior. I'd never heard of the games before or since. Upon entering the community college, one of my friends since elementary school was deciding to get stuff set up to try doing Let's Plays of his own, and while I had an interest in it, I had not really considered the idea myself as yet. Cue a night in 2013. It's late at night, our internet is having issues. I have a report due that I'm trying to submit online. My 2 major ways of trying to wait out this problem are to go to the family desktop and play solitaire while waiting for the internet to load, or else play video games. It had actually been about 5 years since I last picked up the game, but I decided to play the first Crash Bandicoot. The first game is subdivided into 3 islands as a sort of level hub map. I'd gotten to the 3rd and last island and was encountering difficult levels by the time of the internet outage. The high road is a broken bridge with numerous enemies blocking the way, and tricky jumps using both enemy boosts and broken platforms. Slippery Climb, I think, still holds one of the records for the longest in the level before a checkpoint appears at the halfway mark, and contains a colored gemstone required for 100% completion. And the level that caused the whole thing, Fumbling in the Dark, is one where your temporary invincibility power-up is traded for one that lights up the otherwise dark level for a limited time, and you have to race to the next power-up not always at a checkpoint, before the light runs out. While the other two frustrated me, both high road and slippery climb can be done with a certain level of patience and observation. Wait, figure the rhythm, move when it seems most appropriate. Fumbling in the dark is a level about speed and exact timing in a game where patience and pattern observation is more often key. So, cue me passing the first two levels in a few minutes, but spending over an hour on fumbling in the dark. Running, falling, dying, restarting because I need to get the gemstone, trying it again. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until my mother, a devout Christian who tries to keep her own language down, though isn't so hard-nosed about it as most, actually wondered why I was screaming profanity so loud and so many times in a row. A realization hit. PewDiePie seems to get a lot of viewers for yelling and getting frustrated and being scared or running into trouble for amnesia. Maybe my pain would make for good viewing too. It didn't help the internet issues at all. I don't think they got solved until about 1 o'clock in the morning. Did submit the report and did fine on it, but yeah. And it did help my mood. And became the genesis of me recording Let's Play videos and eventually moving over to streaming on Twitch. And, in the ultimate form of irony, once I actually got around to fumbling in the dark, a new trend emerged. Whether streaming or recording, it usually takes me only one time to complete without dying. So the level that caused the problem in the first place is now one of the ones that takes me the least amount of time to complete. A little bit of a darker college experience happened around 2014. My first designs when I went to community college was that I had done well in chemistry and the sciences and wanted to go into pharmacology. I'm talking became the star of my first chemistry classes and showed an odd aptitude for genetic sections during biology where other students were, pun not intended, fumbling. Well, but a problem soon emerged. I am terrible at most math classes. I got a D my first time taking pre-calculus, which necessitated a retake, and got a C during the retake, mostly because the final exam was multiple choice, so I just had to plug the answers in, and got a 95% from reverse engineering everything. The big walloping came with Calculus 1A, where my final exam score was maybe a 45% if I got all the questions I answered correctly, and I came home knowing that wasn't the case. But as pharmacology was mostly dependent on chemistry, and higher levels of chemistry required calculus, that meant my dreams of pharmacology degree were wiped out. The biggest scolding of my academic career was on the night I came home from the calculus exam. I got a huge lecture from my parents about if this was really what I wanted to do. Was I actually doing any studying for it? What happened to doing all the homework and turning it in? What did I plan to do with myself? Was college even worth the expense? Most of it got settled that night. Looking over my transcripts, I had most of the stuff for a social sciences degree and did show heavy interest in social psychology. But it was the first time I ever really went through a state of depression. About a month between semesters where I was listless and basically had little interest in anything. It's not easy when a dream gets smacked down, and there was a short while where I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. We created a plan, but there was still a portion of me that honestly wondered if it was worth it. Crash Bandicoot, to a certain extent, became my savior. Pushing myself to do anything, I put Crash Bandicoot 2 into the PlayStation and kind of forced myself to do a single warp room hub, 5 level entries plus a boss, to 100% completion. There were 5 main warp rooms, which meant I could do it Monday through Friday and then complete the game. And then the next Monday, I ended up doing it all over again. I relearned the game, managed to do it all on my own, and then slowly got better at recognizing certain parts and tricks and tips. And so I'd play it week after week, until a single warp room took me about 25 minutes to complete. Then I started adding in the first game. Heartened by successes now with fumbling in the dark, it was time to learn the rest of the game. So I started playing that one about twice a month when I was done playing Crash 2 for the day. Then I started adding in Warped, which took a little longer with the addition of time trials and relics and secret levels unlocked by the relics, and I completed it one time per month. Over the next year and a half, I played Crash Bandicoot 2 about 75 times, the first game about 30 times, and Warped about 16 times. All of them fully 100% completed every time. Other various games got added into the mix, but I was now doing something. Getting back into something I enjoyed. I've deviated a bit from my family's involvement, but it turns out there were others with a deep interest in the first few games outside of myself that kept the same sort of interest alive even until recently. During Christmas of 2023, I was shocked to find out my uncle, the very same who played Crash 2 with us cousins, wanted a capture box that would fit with an older model PlayStation 2. I didn't find out until then that he and one of my younger cousins, his kid, were actually practicing to try speedrunning the first game. For those who don't know, the simple version of speedrunning basically means that there is a set point for what qualifies as a start, and a set victory condition for what qualifies as an end. The goal to get that victory condition in the game as fast as possible. For example, what is known as a Crash Bandicoot any percent speedrun means your goal is to go from pressing start for a new game until you defeat Dr. Cortex, the final boss, as fast as you can. Unlike normal play, this can result in sometimes counterintuitive strategies for completing levels, since things like bonus rounds and gem screens, which aren't required in an any percent run, take up more time than just blasting through. It was this that got me into the speedrunning scene. Yes, my 30 years older than me uncle is the one who got me into speedrunning. Now, I will fully admit I'm not very good, but in terms of playing, I've been able to do the new version of Crash 1 in the Insane Trilogy, a remastered version of the first 3 games that came out in 2017, in about an hour and 10 minutes. Which isn't enough to put me on any leaderboards, but it does place me far ahead of the 2 hours my cousin can do, as she constantly gets stuck around the levels I mentioned being hard in the first place. I don't normally pull this off. My usual strategy is to go slow and collect almost literally everything I can get my hands on, so a normal run before time trials takes me about 3 hours. I go back a little bit now to the release of that Insane Trilogy. That was the first time I ever done a digital pre-order, and unlike most, I'd done it so far ahead in advance that the timer hadn't even certified a release date yet. I once had a picture on one of my old phones that had the timer until release at a whole 364 days and some hours. It ended up releasing a month or 2 later, not the year the timer said. Which was also perfect timing, as my own versions were starting to get worn out. 380-something times of disc switching in a year and a half is going to do a number on any physical copy. As of now, between occasional attempts at speedrunning and just playing through the original versions of a new format, I think I've played somewhere over 400 hours in just the Insane Trilogy version. And that's not including the port over to the Switch a year later in 2018. And before you ask, no, I haven't been keeping count of this one, how many times I've beaten each game. Just that I can do 100% completion on all of them. The only exception being I still can't hit the time trial in the DLC bonus level Stormy Ascent. I've come close, but that shit is brutal. It was at one point during a family gathering towards the end of 2017 that I mentioned I had gotten and already played through the entire trilogy to my family. My uncle was down with his family. My cousins, some of them out on their own, were in town for a while, and they asked if I could bring my PlayStation 4 over so they could see the remastered version. In fact, surprising me was them making multiple mentions of it during the visit. So it was obvious to me the next evening to pack up my PS4 in a bag and bring it all over to set up. After dinner, with a little help from my cousins in figuring out the aunt's TV and how it would interact with the cable box, we finally set up the PlayStation 4 and I loaded it in. I opened up one of my finished files for Crash 1 with full 100% completion and loaded into the first level, Insanity Beach. Of course, the ones who asked about it were right over to watch, with my uncle and my cousins being the obvious targets. Dad soon joined in, his own appreciation of the series apparent, but there were 2 others who were almost enthralled with it in a way I hadn't seen before. My aunt and my 80-plus-year-old grandmother. My grandmother never had much stock in video games. Not that she saw them as a useless pastime, but she found most of them obnoxious and couldn't necessarily understand why. We took interest, and that was good enough for her that they were meaningful, but she couldn't stand them for very long. Except, for some reason, for Crash. She noted the music was more interesting and vibrant than other games, the cartoony look was appealing, and there was just something kind of fun about it to her. So that night she even tried her hand at Insanity Beach and managed to complete it with all of us cheering her on. Again, Not bad for an 80-year-old who never touched a console in her life. As for the aunt, this was the first time I heard a particular story from her. Unlike my grandmother, she's never had a vocal disinterest in games, but she was very much hands-off and just left it to us cousins to play them more often. Turns out that all started from the very first Christmas when we all got the PlayStation. As our average age was 5, our bedtime that Christmas Eve had been relatively early, about 10:30, with the promise that Santa was come. Indeed, as I eventually figured out later, that was 10 minutes of the adults bringing in hidden gifts for the next day, and mostly an hour later with the kids being in bed, pulling out the drinks and enjoying adult conversations. I quite enjoy the latter now. My cousin's system had been open on Christmas Eve, and we spent a little time playing it, with my aunt deciding to seize the chance of an unoccupied system to try it herself and see what the fuss and interest was about. Now, it should be mentioned that my aunt is very much early to bed, early to rise, with 10 o'clock being considered staying up late for her, and a tendency for walking up a nearby mountain at dawn regularly on her days off work. So it's already after 11 o'clock when she turns on the system, starts up Crash Bandicoot, and begins a new game all the way over at Insanity Beach, as we had not figured out the password system yet, and so had no way to start it in fresh. She played for over 2 hours. According to her, she was not very good. She got maybe 12 levels in. She can't remember where exactly, but she doesn't remember anything specific after Boulder Dash, so that's where I presume she stopped, at nearly 2 in the morning. But she apparently got very zoned in, and it was everyone else saying, we should probably get the presents in for Christmas morning. That made her realize how late she stayed up. She set the console down, turned it off, helped the others get the presents in, then went to bed. But she made a very conscious decision not to play them anymore. Not because she didn't like it, but because she had liked it too much. Enough that she feared she would actively lose track of time. She's never shown that much interest in video games since. She also doesn't really have an addictive personality, so I doubt she really would have lost it like that later on. But for all of that, she still does enjoy watching the rest of us play Crash, and, much like my grandmother, it's one of the ones she can stick around and still have a definitive interest in. So there it is. An odd sort of family affair, and perhaps a very non-traditional one, but one that somehow still seems to keep being treasured nearly 30 whole years later. And maybe that stands as one of the testaments to how much I can keep enjoying this series. Not just for the gameplay or the music, which I do enjoy, but how it keeps popping up as this strange recurring event in my life. Few people can say that they've literally grown up with the game. But honestly, I'm kind of glad this one takes that spot for me. And that has been your bite-sized nugget of storytelling for today. I hope you enjoyed it and amused you as much as it amuses me. If you liked hearing me ramble, hit the like button on the video and hit subscribe to be notified when the next bite-sized episode comes out. You can also support the series by donating to my Ko-fi page, kofi.com/DIYote_gaming, and showing interest in further episode creation. But for now, it's time for me to head out. So until we meet again on these dusty trails, have a howling good day. Take care.